From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefanía Bravo, and this is From the South. Bolivia's President Evo Morales has paid a visit to his Venezuelan counterpart, Nicolas Maduro. Maduro says the meeting was aimed at strengthening ties between the two countries. Morales was on his way to New York to attend the UN General Assembly. Maria Fernanda Espinosa is the first Latin American woman to chair the UN General Assembly. This Ecuadorian politician assumed the presidency of the General Assembly in early September. Espinosa says she wants to promote the United Nations values for peoples across the world.
It is a privilege, an honor, but also a great challenge. We women always have to prove that we are able to do it. Here are big expectations regarding our capacity of promoting another kind of leadership, of changing the world and solving problems.
About 130 world leaders are expected to attend the 73rd UN meeting. The general debate begins on Tuesday and continues until next Monday. This Monday, the UN General Assembly is marking Nelson Mandela's centenary with a summit on peace. Mandela is being honored as one of the world's greatest leaders. Members have highlighted his fight for human rights and social justice. The Colombian and Cuban presidents, Iván Duque and Miguel Díaz-Canel, were scheduled to speak in the summit.
Members of this esteemed chamber, do not let this be just another summit of statements. Bold, unprecedented action must follow. As for me, the meaning of celebrating Madiba is to work to end this senseless violence as a matter of priority and urgency.
On his arrival in New York, the Cuban president, Miguel Díaz-Canel, said he would like a civilized relationship.
It's a moment in which there's a setback in regards to our relationship with the U.S. government, where there is an administration that has returned to the discourse of the Cold War, which has revitalized the Monroe Doctrine, therefore an administration with which it is difficult to advance in a relationship between equals, seeking a civilized relationship despite differences.
At the UN, the U.S. President Donald Trump has said the global drug problem is a public health and national security threat. Some 129 countries have signed on to a U.S. drafted pledge on this issue. They promise to develop national action plans to reduce demand for illicit drugs.
In the United States, we're taking aggressive action, securing our borders, supporting law enforcement, devoting record funding to the opioid crisis, and promoting treatment and recovery. Many nations here today are also taking bold action. Newly elected President Duque, Colombia, campaigned on an anti-drug platform and won a very, very impressive victory. Congratulations.
Another social leader has been killed in Colombia. Campesino leader Carmen Elizabeth Tintinago was killed in the Cauca region. Her name adds up to the list of more than 2,000 social leaders killed since the government and the FARC signed the peace agreement. Social organizations are urging authorities to protect their leaders. 164 have been killed this year alone. Our correspondent José Manuel Jiménez reports on the latest developments in some of these cases.
Saludos a ustedes y a los televidentes. Efectivamente, la situación para los líderes sociales y
Indeed, the situation for social leaders and human rights defenders is one of permanent danger across the country. We are talking about more than 165 leaders killed in 2018 in different regions such as the department of Meta and Cauca, Mariño and Antioquia. In this last department in 2018, there have been already 27 assassinated leaders and also 22 leaders who have been forced from their homes. In addition, there are 4,200 people displaced because of the armed groups like the Clan of the Gulf and the Carrapatos, self-defense Gaitanists of Colombia, the Águilas Negras, and also armed groups working for the Mexican cartels seeking to take over land. According to CODES, 38,000 people have been forcibly displaced in 2018, a humanitarian crisis not being addressed by the government. President Ivan Duque, in his workshop Building Countries in New York City, discussed the issue and the future of negotiations with the LNN. According to the government, negotiations are frozen until the group meet all conditions laid out by the administration. He also touched on how to combat narco-trafficking through rules and guiltiness raised by the U.S. government. He discussed the situation in Venezuela and the advance of strategy using policy, economy and social pressure to remove President Nicolas Maduro. However, he did not make time to talk about the 38,000 displaced people in the country and more than 165 leaders killed during 2018.
We thank Jose Manuel Jimenez for that report. Meanwhile, social organizations and human rights defenders are urging authorities to protect the lives of journalists as well. We have more in this report.
The last 2 years has registered the highest number of social leaders killed. Violence is also threatening the lives of journalists around the country.
In September, we received a threat for some investigations we published. It was footage of the paramilitary and information on the false positive case that involves the paramilitary as well as military personnel. This worries us because this case was presented in a court of the special jurisdiction for peace.
According to press freedom organization FLIP, the threats and murders of social leaders have rose. 59 cases of threats were presented in 2015, 90 in 2016, and 129 in 2017.
The same people that are threatening the fight of social leaders are also threatening campesinos, indigenous people, and the youth. They're also preventing people from fighting for their rights and preventing journalists to report on this conflict.
Member of the Commission of Safety Guarantees, Franklin Castañeda, says that even though this new government has promoted different dialogue tables to resolve the situation, no measure has been taken to tackle violence.
There have been spaces of dialogue between civilians and the state. The international community has monitored this dialogue and have asked for measures to protect social leaders and defenders.
Social movements are taking their own measures to protect the lives of leaders and journalists and guarantee their work.
We are promoting self-protection. We are doing this through knowing our territory and promoting the relations with our people. We are guaranteeing our rights.
According to the non-governmental organization, in the past, the presence of armed groups in the country has rose. Paramilitary groups reported to be in Antioquia, Arauca, Atlántico, Bolívar, Boyacá, Caldas, Cauca, Cesar, and Córdoba. Meanwhile, the Pelusos armed group and the National Liberation Army control Santander and the north of Santander.
Our biggest fear is that people from the intelligence services are linked to these groups. We don't understand how certain people are threatened and others are protected. There's no evidence of who is behind these threats.
Journalists, social leaders, and human rights organizations say that the government does not know who these groups are and how they operate. President Duque said he was committed to fight violence. However, until now, the government has not met with civilians, social movements, or human rights organizations.
3 people have been arrested in Venezuela linked to the attack against President Nicolas Maduro in early August. Communications Minister Jorge Rodriguez identified Henry Bert Rivas, Angela Lisbeth Esposita, and a retired colonel as those who led the failed assassination attempt. Rodriguez said authorities continue to search for 2 others connected to the attack. The government has asked Chile, Colombia, and Mexico to clarify if any embassy workers would be involved.
This attack could have taken us towards a very difficult situation, to serious consequences for the Venezuelan people, to a situation of violence if these criminals would have succeeded in their attack. President Maduro will give the pertinent orders to his foreign minister, Jorge Arriaza, so that these public officials clarify from Chile, Colombia and Mexico their alleged involvement. There's no diplomatic immunity in case of cover-up of terrorists.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us.
infested by inequalities, abuse of power, and injustice. The American journalist Abby Martin covers the struggle for fundamental rights worldwide, deepening into the search of files which uncover the empire's strategies through our screen and web platform in English. The Empire Files with Abby Martin. Tuesday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. An indigenous social leader has been killed in Guatemala. Juana Ramirez Santiago was a leader of the indigenous Ixil community. She was shot 4 times after she denounced several threats. She was a prominent figure in the defense of women and human rights. Journalists have rallied in the Mexican state of Chiapas after the murder of their colleague Mario Gomez. They are urging authorities for justice and for their lives to be protected. Gomez was killed from 3 gunshots as he was leaving his house. He had previously reported threats he received. Gomez is the 9th journalist killed so far in 2018.
Mario had already been threatened previously, almost 2 years ago. He came to Tuxtla, handed in a criminal report. He had his photo taken with the prosecutor Raciel Lopez Salazar. Only 1 or 2 months later, they offered him security. Then they didn't listen to him.
The president of labor union Coparmex has been murdered in the Mexican state of Chihuahua. Uriel Loya Diester was shot by 2 men from a car and a motorbike when he was eating with his family. Authorities are investigating the causes of the incident. And still in Mexico, authorities have been carrying out DNA tests after a truck full of bodies was found in Guadalajara. Dozens of people from across the country are heading to this city, hoping to find their missing relatives. They can complete a genetic profile in the hope to find a match. A community in Mexico City uses La Faena, an ancient social organization system that helps them reinforce their identity and face their problems.
Maria Jimenez has many reasons to be proud of her new house. She lives in San Gregorio, a village in the south of Mexico, DC. It was with all her efforts and the help of the community that allowed that to happen.
It was a dream with real results. We're seeing those results here. We're really thankful.
In the Xochimilco region, where ruins of damaged buildings 1 year after the 2017 earthquake remain, solidarity between people replaced broken promises from the local government.
We have been waiting for government's help and it never arrived. So when they said we're going to build this, the first thought was incredulity.
The cultural centre has received funds from the community and a group of neighbours known as Chicuarotes, named after a local source. The centre celebrates its rich history.
People from Ejidal organize themselves. It is a village that has survived because they have organized themselves.
For these people, social work brings people closer together. By doing so, they go back to an ancient Mexican practice called La Faena.
All people are part of a working day. They all participate in agriculture tasks, construction. Everyone participates in anything that the community has decided to elaborate.
La Faena is a tradition that many ancient Mexican villages still practice. People from San Gregorio say that it's thanks to this ancient method of organization that they can still face their everyday problems.
A 36-hour transport strike is set to start on Monday in Argentina against the austerity measures of President Mauricio Macri. Trains, buses, subways, and flights will cease to operate during the strike. Airlines announced that nearly 80,000 passengers will have to cancel or reschedule their flights. Public transport, banks, and schools won't open either. Argentinians have started to exchange goods to sustain themselves as the economic crisis worsens. Residents of Monte Grande in the province of Buenos Aires began bartering or buying products in bulk since the beginning of 2018. Basic food prices have surged to more than double. Inflation will likely reach 30% by the end of September.
The group is big because the need is big. What we do is exchange what we don't use, and even what we do use for food, for merchandising, wherever it is oil, meat, sugar, or whatever.
The funeral for both him, Shem John, will take place Monday afternoon in his native St. Lucia. John's body was flown home over the weekend for the funeral. He will be held at the Minor Basilica in Castries and will be laid to rest at Choc Cemetery. He was killed earlier this month in his Dallas home by a police officer. His murder gathered nationwide attention across the U.S., the Caribbean, sparking several protests. And the news just coming in, Dallas police officer Amber Guyer has just been fired after shooting her neighbor, Botham Jean. Dallas police informed of his latest move in a tweet on its official Twitter page a short while ago. A state of emergency has been declared in parts of Jamaica's capital city. Prime Minister Andrew Holmes made the announcement on Sunday. The state of emergency will last initially for 14 days. He says this is being done to address long-standing issues related to crime and public safety.
Morning, everyone. The government considers it necessary to use the extraordinary powers provided for within the state of public emergency to address long-standing and entrenched crime and public order issues which have threatened lives, indeed taken lives, curtailed businesses, undermined the rule of law, and have deprived citizens their general right to live peacefully and enjoy a good quality of life.
Protests erupted in Haiti over the misuse of nearly $2 billion set aside for the Petrocaribe program. Demonstrators demanded an inquiry into allegations of fraud by several government ministers. Security forces were on hand to defuse tensions. The program allowed participating countries to buy cheap oil with an extended repayment plan at a 1% interest rate. So far, no minister has been convicted. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi says his country is ready to enhance cooperation with the Caribbean Community, or CARICOM. Wang said that both parties share common interests. He added their cooperation represents a vital part of their ties with Latin America. China will provide these countries with assistance within the framework of the South-South participation. Trinidad and Tobago's Carnival officially launched on Sunday. This launch serves to signal the marketing campaign for the festival, which has spawned copycats throughout the world. But the chairman of the National Carnival Commission warned the festival is losing its place as a leader of the West Indian-style carnival. The commission's chair says his goal is to bring back the festival.
I want to say to you that they have surveys that are done over the world of carnivals that we have spawned in most metropolitan cities of this world. And in Trinidad and Tobago, carnival is not even mentioned in the first 10 carnivals in the world. So if Trinidad and Tobago carnival is not mentioned in the first 10 carnivals in the world, and we are continuing to say that we have the best carnival in the world, then we are legends in our own minds. We have to address that and ensure that that doesn't happen.
The Brazilian National Museum launched a festival to promote history and science. This comes after the devastating fire that destroyed the building in early September. Visitors can see the recovered items and learn about reconstruction efforts. Named National Museum Lives, the festival is organized by museum workers. The fire destroyed almost the entire collection of the 200-year-old institute. Museum authorities hope to host events like these regularly.
It's not every day that you get to touch a living snake with your hands. It's also very sad to see the museum burned. There are many historical pieces that were lost. But that exhibition is very interesting because we can touch things.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us.
Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transform the world today. Mondays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. The Israeli government has ordered the residents of the Palestinian town of Khan al-Mar to leave their homes before the 1st of October. The Israeli forces says they would not only demolish the houses themselves if the villagers don't leave, but would also make them pay for it. Its 180 inhabitants decided to stay. The UN, the EU, and human rights organizations have condemned the measure. Our correspondent in Cairo, Nayara Tardo, brings us more.
Israel continues to harass the inhabitants of the village of Khan al-Ahmar, threatening to demolish their homes before the beginning of October. On Sunday, the Israeli army entered this village to serve eviction notices to the people, warning them that if they didn't demolish their own homes, the army will do it for them. About 200 Palestinian refugees live in this village, all of them registered under the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees. International bodies such as this have asked the Israeli government to put an end to this harassment. For its part, the Palestinian government has said these actions are an attempt against the establishment of a sovereign Palestinian state.
We thank Nayara for that report. The economic freedom fighters have called for the removal of all apartheid colonial statues and symbols in South Africa. The news came on the day South Africans celebrate Heritage Day. An official statement said such symbols perpetuate the comfort of racist and white supremacy. It also added land is the most important heritage upon which all culture are based on. 5 million children are at risk of famine in Yemen. According to the organization Save the Children, prices of food have soared. Saudi Arabia's long-standing blockade of Yemen's main Hodeidah port is preventing large quantities of food, fuel, and medicine from reaching millions of people. Tanzanians began to bury their dead on Sunday after a ferry capsized, killing 224 people. Prime Minister Kassim Majaliwa declared a national day of mourning and led the funerals. The ferry was on its way to dock on the island of Ukara when the accident occurred. Many of the victims are still unidentified. A new round of tariffs between China and the U.S. came into effect on Monday. The U.S. tariffs will affect Chinese products such as food, seasonings, baseball gloves, and parts for industrial machinery. U.S.-made chemicals, clothes, and car parts will be subject to Chinese levies. U.S. President Donald Trump has warned tariffs would increase to 25% by January 1st unless the U.S. and China reach a trade deal. Our correspondent in Beijing, Isaura Diaz, has more.
Starting today, the Chinese government has applied tariffs worth $60 billion on 5,207 US products. This is a direct response to tariffs imposed by the US on Chinese products that are, for their part, worth $200 billion. Officials from the Chinese Customs and Tariffs Commission said that China made a decision in order to defend its rights and legitimate interests as well as to defend international stability. The Chinese government also presented a complaint to the World Trade Organization. Nonetheless, Beijing insists that dialogue, respect and negotiations are paramount to ending this trade war that threatens global economy, and that these new round of tariffs are only worsening this situation. On Monday, the Chinese government also published a white paper detailing trade relations between both countries and making clear China's stance on the issues with the hope of finding a reasonable solution.
A second woman has accused U.S. President Donald Trump's nominee to the Supreme Court, Brett Kavanaugh, of sexual misconduct. Deborah Ramirez says Kavanaugh exposed himself to her in the 1980s when they were studying at Yale University. Meanwhile, Christine Blasey Ford has agreed to testify before Senate after accusing the Supreme Court nominee of sexual assault. The Senate Judiciary Committee delayed a vote on Kavanaugh's confirmation. China has celebrated the first National Harvest Festival to farmers. Farmers make up the majority of the Chinese population. Farmers' incomes have continued to grow since 2012 due to government support for rural development and efforts to reduce poverty. In addition to Beijing, 6 major agricultural areas around the country also stage hundreds of events to mark the festival. Hindus have paid tribute to God Ganesh in Mumbai. Devotees danced to the music of drums and threw red powder around the figure. They also immersed the elephant-headed deity into the Arabian Sea to mark the last day of the Ganesh Charitable Festival. Ganesh is known as the god of arts and science and the lord of abundance. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And also join us on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.